Digital Marketing Radio, episode 232, iOS 14, Apple versus Facebook, and the impact on advertisers and publishers.
Digital Marketing Radio with David Bain.
Hi, I'm David Bain, and this is Digital Marketing Radio, the show for in-house, agency, and entrepreneurial marketers who want to stay on top of the latest tools, tactics, and trends shared on this very show by today's modern marketing masters. Now, Apple and Facebook are fighting again. This time, it's over ads and user privacy. Apple is rolling out its iOS 14 updates with a privacy change that could result in Facebook experiencing a significant cut in its advertising revenue. Today, we're discussing what impact this has on you as an advertiser or as a publisher and what you need to do about it. Joining me today to discuss that is a man who's been a leader in the online ads industry for the last 20 years. He's a former head of biddable media at Cheapflights and the current CEO of Spades Media and the founder of Elite Media Buyers. Welcome to DMR, Jim Banks.
Hi, David. Good to be here.
Good to have you here. Well, thanks for joining us, Jim. You can find Jim over at elitemediabuyers.com. So, Jim, what's happening here? What issues do Facebook have with iOS 14?
So I think the first thing to say, David, is that Facebook and Apple, unlike a lot of these companies, these big kind of tech companies, they don't really like each other, right? I mean, I've been sort of listening to kind of Facebook's view on how Apple are dealing with things really since sort of like last summer, right? I think it was sort of June they started rolling out some of these changes that they were kind of putting in place. And I think, I think it's been like very, very apparent that they really don't like each other. And I think in some respects, it's almost like as much as, yes, it's about privacy, right? And privacy is important, right? And Apple are not the only people that are kind of trying to do something about this. I mean, Google and the consortium are trying to do something called a federated learning of cohorts to try and sort of, make it so that people are no longer sort of being able to be targeted at such a granular level, right? But advertisers still can kind of do some degree of targeting. So there's a lot of work being done by a consortium that includes Google, but it also includes other people. And I think really kind of Apple have sort of been sitting out on their own in isolation. And as much as people think this kind of Facebook versus Apple and iOS 14 is the only kind of thing that is actually an issue, really it's kind of like it's a much bigger, longer term issue. I mean, Chrome are changing their sort of, and I think really what the idea behind it is it's really the death of the kind of third party cookie, right? I think that's really where ultimately all of these changes are heading. And it's really just a case of how big tech companies can actually provide a experience good for you. It's good for them and it's good for the advertisers and the publishers. So kind of like there's four components that make up the experience, and they're trying to find something that's good for all four components, right? And unlike Google have been talking to other people. They've been talking to advertisers, talking to publishers, talking to, other sort of, marketing partners, right? Really kind of Apple have been doing this completely on their own. They haven't really been talking to anyone. And I think that's probably why Facebook took as much umbrage as they have with this kind of rollout with the iOS 14 kind of update that, I think it's sort of, it's gone in stages, and I think the next stage is due to take place sometime. They call it in early spring, right? So that should really be probably sometime, I would guess next month. I mean, I have heard the date of the 22nd of March bandied around, but again, it's like it could be pushed back. I mean, who knows? It's a bit like the lockdown and tears and all this. So who knows what's going to happen, really?
So just for historical context, we're recording this on the 24th of February 2021. And what's happened recently is Facebook have, in Australia, decided not to display the content from the various news companies there, and then they've done a back turn on that. So we've certainly seen a lot of tech companies flexing muscles recently. Do you have any opinions as to who's in the right or who's in the wrong about what's happening between Facebook and Apple at the moment?
Yeah, So I think that the thing is, I think if Apple had said we're concerned about privacy, right, and and left it at that, fine. But they said we're concerned about privacy, and then they said people need to switch their browser to kind of use Safari, and they said that really, if you want to kind of like get news, you should use Apple News, right? And really, all they've done is all the suggestions that they've made around privacy have been to do with switching kind of like your allegiance to Apple related products, right? And in some respects, again, if you look at it, they're big publicly traded companies, right? They have a kind of obligation to shareholders. They have an obligation to kind of grow their revenue base, right? And if you think about kind of where they've gone with the iPhone, right? They've kind of, I mean, again, I don't know where they can go with the kind of the evolution of the telephone technology, right? I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of people that regardless of what changes they make, as soon as they come out with a new iPhone, they'll get one, right? But it's almost like it seems to have gone from small devices to big devices, and now they're going back down to small ones, right? And then they've got these sort of ones that you flip in half and everything else. But again, I think the evolution of that is coming to an end, right? And they've gone, well, where is our next kind of big chunky revenue going to come from? And I think they're obviously seeing that in the ad space, and they're also seeing that in terms of revenue from the App Store, right? And I think that's really what they're trying to do, is they're trying to sort of almost like force the conversation in favor of them.
It would certainly be interesting to have a lengthy conversation about Apple's strategy, whether or not it's actually trying to keep people in its ecosystem. I've heard stories like them not willing to bring in other default messenger apps apart from their own in iOS as well. But that's probably a lengthy conversation in itself. So let's talk about iOS 14 specifically and what's happening between Apple and Facebook and the impact, obviously, that's having on advertisers and publishers. So shall we start on publishers first of all? What kind of impact is this going to have on publishers?
Yeah, so I think the way that sort of publishers historically, I mean, some of the changes that have been sort of like talked about have been already kind of rolled out, right? So I think again, like that there is a massive kind of developer base of people that have developed apps, and they use Facebook as a kind of means to monetize their app proposition, and that's quite often done through in-app purchases or subscriptions, or people tiering up and leveling up in games and things like that, right? And again, it's like if they're losing the ability to kind of track at a granular level where people have got to in a particular experience, their ability for them to be able to personalize the experience and monetize it is going to change, right? So I think what is effectively happening is they're moving from this sort of hyper granular kind of targeting capabilities that really I think a lot of advertisers and publishers have kind of done well from, right, to this. It's much more kind of, it's going to be aggregated now, right? It's going to be delayed. So again, you're not going to get data in real time. It's going to be delayed, right? Because again, if you think about it, if they know in real time what is happening, then they can actually say, well, that's actually David playing on his iPhone in the toilet or whatever it might be, right? They'll know who you are. So what they're actually doing is they're going to delay it between towards the kind of the firing of conversion events between sort of 24 and 72 hours, right? And it's going to be random. And they're only going to really pass back the kind of the most important conversion event, right? And that's on both the advertiser and the publisher side, right? So obviously on the publisher side of things, their ability to kind of monetize will need to change, right? And they may well need to kind of look more at kind of in-app purchases as the way in which they can kind of monetize their experience rather than what they've had sort of historically.
Okay, got you. So perhaps Apple, again, driving people further into their ecosystem, including publishers as well as users themselves.
Yeah.
What about then the future strategy of advertisers? Is this going to impact the way that advertisers actually currently conduct campaigns?
Yeah, so I think the ability for people to kind of do granular targeting is going to kind of change, right? So if people opt in, so what's happening is that they're going to have to kind of like when Apple push this next mechanism out, I can't think what it's called, ATT, I think is the kind of the shortened version, whatever ATT is.
Okay.
But basically, I'll find it and I'll tell you. It's on my iPad, which I've put outside in the corridor, David. But it's on my notes, right? But I
searched Google for ATT Apple. It just comes up with AT&T, so that's not particularly helpful. So
yeah. I'll find it. I've definitely got it. Kind of. I've got all this written down.
Is it app tracking transparency?
That's it. Yeah. So what will happen is that people will have the option to opt in, right? Because historically, all of these sort of mechanisms have been opt out. So people can say, hey, you know what? I don't want you to track me. Whereas now people actually have to expressly give an app permission, right, for them to be tracked at a kind of granular level. And if people actually say, no, I don't want that, right, then you cannot track those people. You won't be able to kind of include them in audiences and everything else. So what will happen is that your ability to create audiences that are sort of hyper granular will diminish, right? So the audience sizes that you have will be smaller, right? The days of you being able to kind of optimize to certain conversion events. So again, it used to be you could optimize to somebody viewed your homepage, or somebody downloaded an ebook, or somebody added a product to the cart, somebody initiated a checkout, right? Or somebody made a purchase. All of those could be sort of treated as a conversion event, and you could optimize campaigns towards those. What will happen now is that you'll actually only be able to optimize to one event, right? So you have to kind of choose it's almost like you have to kind of choose which one of your children you want to save, right? It's like there's going to be sort of one conversion event that you can optimize on, right, and get reported on, right? And everything else is going to be just kind of like aggregated. So, they're going from kind of granular kind of reporting and attribution to not very granular reporting at all, and a lot of guesswork, right?
So what would this mean for retargeting? Because obviously if someone hasn't made a purchase, they may have done something like add a product to a cart, or spent a certain length of time on your website to indicate that they're perhaps a likely customer in the future, and you want to do a retargeting campaign, but your main call to action that you're tracking, i.e. a sale, is not what you're tracking that user is doing. So will it impact retargeting in any way as well?
Yeah, it'll impact it dramatically. And obviously the only people that you'll be able to remarket to are the people that are not on iOS. And I think a lot of people are confusing. They think iOS is just the kind of the mobile and like iPads, right? But the way that Facebook had the choice, they could either kind of like not show this ATT prompt, right? Or they could actually continue to kind of collect the IDFAs, which is the kind of the device ID for iOS devices, right? But that kind of applies. That then means that it applies across all devices. So it's not just the activity that happens on iOS devices. It's basically all devices. So even if people are doing web-based activity, this kind of change will also impact that as well. And I think that's certainly when I've been reading this, has been the biggest kind of thing that I've disagreed with most of the people that are talking about this, is that they think this is only going to apply to iOS devices. So they say it's only going to be like 7 or 8% of my traffic. So it's no big deal, right? This is a huge, huge issue, right? Because this will impact your ability for all devices. So the only people that you'll be able to remarket to will be people who are on Android devices, and also people who are opted in, right? Which again, at this particular point in time, it's a bit of a coin toss as to what that number is, right? It could be very low, it could be very high. It really depends. I mean, I think what they're trying to do is they're jockeying to see whether they can use different wording, right? Because I think the Apple wording is very kind of smack you in the face. And I think Facebook want to use something that's a little bit more, we want to kind of like, again, what they want to say is, if we don't allow you to opt in, right, publishers will probably, again, I think the upshot will be, if people opt out, right, what will happen is that publishers will need to find a different way to monetize their app, which will probably be in-app purchases. And like the things that people are getting for free now, right, news and everything else, they'll probably have to start paying for, right? So ultimately, I think the end user in all of this is the person, the party that will probably lose out the most. Right, I think the end user is going to be the people that all of the kind of the nonsense between Facebook and Apple is going to be passed on to the end user, who's going to end up paying for things that they kind of rely on for free now, which is like the Facebook in Australia. You mentioned it kind of earlier on. It's like if ultimately Facebook and News Corp have to sit down and negotiate a rate for Facebook to pay News Corp for the news that they have, right? That money is not just going to come from like the ether. That's going to have to come from somewhere, right? So they're going to have to be a little bit sort of mindful about how they actually, how they actually monetize it. And again, I think if you look at it, we're all almost like, I know that we are in a bubble at the moment, but it's like, I think Facebook are desperately kind of worried that once the pandemic ends and people come out of lockdown, that their reason to kind of stay at home and be on Facebook will disappear. I think a lot of people are predicting that once the pandemic ends, that the daily average use on Facebook will diminish like a lot, right? I think that the daily average users will plummet, right? Because I think a lot of people kind of checked out, certainly in America, they checked out of Facebook because of all the political advertising and nonsense that was going on there. It's become a platform that I think doesn't really kind of resonate with people. And I think a lot of people have switched to TikTok, and they switched to Snapchat, and obviously switched to Clubhouse.
So you it talks about the users perhaps being the ones that lose out in the end. And is it not just particularly annoying, though, for users to visit a web page, and every single time they visit a new website, they see a pop-up to say, allow cookies or these new tracking mechanisms that Apple are talking about there as well? Is that not just bad for user experience?
Yeah. I think if you think about it, I mean, like, I'm at these people. If I have the option of accepting cookies and getting a personalized ad experience versus getting an ad experience that's not personalized, I'll take the personalized ad experience every time, right? Because then that way, right, I'm going to get something that will be more relevant to my interests rather than just random ads. It's like the ads are not going away, right? That's not that, the ads are still going to be there, right? So the best thing that I think we as users can do is to accept the personalized ads, because it helps to keep the internet free, right? Like I said, a lot of the kind of tools and services that we rely on now, right? Ultimately, if we don't kind of, address this properly, we could end up having to pay for things that, that we can get for free now, right? Again, yeah. I pay a subscription to Medium, right? And really that's probably the only sort of news source that I pay kind of for my news. But again, I mean, there was a lot of hoo-ha in the pandemic, because sites that were providing kind of important information to the public were going, hey, this is kind of behind a paywall. If you want to read this article about which hospitals are open for this, right, you have to kind of pay money. And it's just like, well, no, I've got somebody that's needs a hospital, and they need the information kind of be readily available.
So just back to what you were talking about a second ago, in relation to retargeting, will it then be the case that in the future that you won't fire a tracking script on every page on your website, and it'll only be necessary and best practice to fire a script on the pages or the steps that you wish to track?
Yeah, I think what will happen, David, is that eventually, I'm not sure what time frame. I mean, this may well be when kind of Google rolls out its kind of Flock or Turtle Dove, whatever they're kind of calling it, when they implement their kind of solution for Chrome, right? I think what you will probably find is that there will be trusted third parties that will have scripts that kind of sit server side that will fire the information that needs to happen, right? It's really just a case of, the information will be important to kind of say, well, this is a returning customer, right? But we need to be able to kind of have a way to protect people's information without it being, this is, David, he's this age, he's this gender, he lives in this area, he earns this money, he drives this car, he's got this many children, all that sort of stuff. I think a lot of that will kind of go away. And I think what will probably happen is that on websites themselves and in apps, there will be no tracking codes per se. But what will happen is that on the server side, that the kind of codes will be able to say, based on this random ID and this random ID and this random ID, we can kind of say that this person is in this bucket, right? And again, they'll have the ability for you to be able to put you in a bucket without actually knowing that it's you that is being put in that bucket.
So is there anything that advertisers need to do right now to change the way that they're going about running their campaigns? Or is it a case of actually just sit and wait to see what happens and be prepared to change over the coming months and years?
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely some suggestions that Facebook recommend that people take. And one of the first things that they need to do is to verify the domain that they use for their ads, right? Because effectively you can have a certain number of events per domain or per ad account, but it's also per domain, right? So if you're running, and again, this is probably more of an issue when you have businesses that are kind of enterprise businesses that have maybe 7 or 8 different different countries that they might send traffic to. So again, like as an example, so you mentioned like when I worked at Cheapflights. So Cheapflights, we had stuff running in South Africa, we had stuff running in Canada, and if people were in Canada and they saw one of our kind of pages in the UK, we would redirect them to the UK site. And obviously, if you have one domain, only the domain that you have. So in that case, it would be cheapflights.ca. That's the only domain that Facebook would basically say, well, we're only going to track information for that domain. So it's important that you kind of structure your campaigns properly to make sure that the events that you're able to kind of track are tracked correctly. Right. And again, they put it in every ad account. They've added a resource center. And if you go in there, the instructions will be there in terms of what steps you need to take. Right. And definitely the things that you can be doing like right now are, verifying the domain, checking that there's no sort of domains that are not the ones that you want to kind of fire your pixel are in it. Right. And again, I would probably suggest that you kind of create either a whitelist or a blacklist, depending on whether there's more of one than the other, to kind of say, well, this is the only domain that I want to kind of track in that particular account. And the other thing I would sort of suggest is that obviously we're moving away from having lots and lots of choices in terms of attribution windows, right? I think, again, if I was an agency that was relying on Facebook's data for my remuneration, I'd be really worried at the moment, right? Because obviously, all the conversions that happen when people leave Facebook and go somewhere else, right? Facebook will still claim credit for those under the current rules, and all of those sort of like third-party sites that people visit, Facebook will just stop tracking those by virtue of this sort of aggregated and sort of the way the kind of configuration is going to be done.
So going back to domains, if you were working for a big international firm with maybe 50 different country sites, and they were maybe thinking of redeveloping their website, would you actually be tempted to suggest that they move to a .com to cover all countries, and then simply redirect the country domains to a folder on the .com?
Yeah, because I think what's happened with a lot of businesses is that they've ended up with multiple business managers and multiple agencies managing their accounts, right? And it's going, again, I think they need to kind of trim down a lot of the excess fat that they got on their business manager account structure, and make it sort of that it's pretty lean and kind of and pretty mean, right? And again, I think on developers.google.com, they did a kind of webinar just a couple of days ago where they talked about the way in which you should try and configure those sorts of situations. So again, if you're an enterprise business that that has that kind of complexity of multiple lines of business or business managers, multiple agencies, you need to be a little bit more careful about the way in which you structure it, because you'll run out of the ability for you to be able to kind of track the things that you want to track pretty quickly.
Great stuff. Okay, well, let's segue to part 2 of our discussion. So it's now time for Jim's thoughts on the state of digital marketing today. So starting off with
secret software.
So Jim, share a lesser known MarTech tool that's bringing you a lot of value at the moment, and why that tool is important for you.
So the tool that I use a fair bit, and whenever I talk to people, they go, "Oh, I didn't realize that you could use that." It's probably, I say it's a marketing tool, but Hemingway, right? So Hemingway is like a sort of an app that I use that helps me to kind of write better quality words, right? So what it will do is it will take a particular phrase or sentence, and it will make suggestions. So it's it will make suggestions for ways in which you can kind of rework things, right? So again, like if your writing style is too wordy, it will make suggestions as to how you can kind of make it smaller, and it will kind of give you adjectives to remove and change tenses and things like that. So for me, it's been really helpful. Whenever I've written stuff, I'm like, I'll just throw that into Hemingway, and it will come up with some good suggestions as to kind of what you can do to kind of make it more readable for the audience that you intend it to be read by.
Sounds like a great tool. I haven't tried it out yet, so I love hearing about tools that I haven't tried yet as well. But let's move on from something that you currently use to something that you're going to use. So
next on the list,
what's one marketing activity or tool that you haven't tried yet, but you want to test soon?
So this is a good plug for our friend Dixon. So InLinks, I've been talking to Dixon, and InLinks is definitely something that I think would be beneficial for my business and also for my clients. So.
Great stuff. Okay, yeah, you can find Dixon's site over at inlinks.net, and I host a monthly show for them as well, so you can.
It's nice to see him back up on his feet as well, right? Because he's
absolutely. It was scary what happened to him. He came off his mountain bike and he's cracked his pelvis, didn't he? And it was it was really. He wasn't sure as to what that would mean in terms of his ability to walk in the future, but he's just doing so well at the moment. So great to see.
Yeah.
So let's move on to
the this or that round.
So this is the quick response round.
I hate this round. Whenever I've seen anyone else, I'm like, oh no, not that one. But we'll go.
And I definitely don't prep people on these 10 quick questions. Just 2 rows here. Try not to think about the answer too much, and you're only allowed to say the word both on one occasion. So use it wisely. Are you ready to go?
Okay. I am.
TikTok or Twitter?
Twitter.
Facebook or LinkedIn?
Facebook.
YouTube or podcast?
YouTube.
Traffic or leads?
Leads.
Paid search or SEO?
Paid search.
Ads or influencers?
Ads.
Google ads or Facebook ads?
Both.
Email or
said
chat?
It once, right? Once, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Email or chat?
Email.
MarTech stack or all-in-one platform?
All-in-one platform.
And one-to-one or scale?
Scale.
You got there, and obviously Google ads or Facebook ads was the biggest challenge there. So is that because you try and use them both for most companies that you work for, or they're right for different situations? And maybe if you can give an example of what situation's better for each platform. Yeah, sure. So you mentioned Google ads or Facebook ads there. That was the one that you used your both for. So I was just delving into that one a little bit more and asking you why that was. Do you try to use both platforms for every company you work with, or are there certain situations that certain platforms are better?
I would definitely say, budget permitting, if they have the ability to kind of both, I think they should. I think, again, there are a lot of like Facebook only agencies, and to me, I think we're missing opportunities if that's the kind of model that people were employing. Because again, I look at it and go, there are the people that you are trying to target are not spending their entire life in the Facebook ecosystem. Again, even though here in the UK yesterday and in Canada, the kind of Facebook have pushed out Facebook shops, which gives you the ability to kind of buy products on Facebook without actually having to leave the Facebook ecosystem. But again, there's kind of a lot of people have had conversations about, buying stuff on Amazon, and that obviously ties you to kind of one brand, which isn't good. But I think a lot of people may start their kind of journey at the sort of top of the funnel by, doing a sort of a more holistic kind of search in maybe Google. They may go on to Facebook. You have the ability to kind of retarget to them again currently, right? That may all change with the new rules as they come out, right? But currently you can kind of retarget people who have seen an ad on Google in Facebook. Equally, you can retarget people that have seen an ad on Facebook in Google, right? So I think if you're not sort of following the breadcrumb trail of where people end up, right, then you're missing out on opportunities to kind of continue a conversation that you may have started on one platform and sort of conclude it on another.
Yeah, it's a great point. If you're a Facebook-only agency in terms of Facebook ads is all you do in terms of helping clients out, I guess the thing was 3, 4, 5 years ago or so.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, David, it's like the reason that the Facebook ad agencies don't really care is because of the way the Facebook pixel and SDK attributes the sale, right? Even if they convert on Google, right, by typing in a particular search term, right, Facebook will still claim credit for the sale, right? But ultimately, if you think of it from an attribution perspective, right, Facebook should not be getting all the credit for that sale because they were not the only channel that converted that particular visitor into a sale, right? So if you don't actually distribute your the money that you've got collected from a sale kind of correctly, then you'll end up kind of rewarding one channel all the time and punishing the other, right? So if you just say we're going to give all the credit to Facebook, then ultimately what will happen is people will just say Google's not working for me, I'm going to switch it off. When really that's
Are you a fan of a particular type of attribution model?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you have the data volume sufficiently, again, like Facebook attribution is a great tool, great product. We use that a lot. Also, Google attribution is a good tool, and we use that a lot as well. And it gives us the ability to actually look at the different models that are available, right? In the Google ecosystem, if you've got enough conversion data for you to have a data-driven attribution model, then that's definitely the one that we would like to see, right? Failing that, we prefer a linear model. I don't like last click. I don't like first click, right? Linear just kind of rewards each step in the journey, kind of like in an equal proportion. So if there were 5 touch points, so let's say it was a Google search, YouTube ad, display, Google search, each gets 20% of the conversion value, rather than all of the conversion value getting attributed to the last touch. And in Facebook, again, we've always kind of erred on the side of caution. So we've always kind of gone either 7 or 1 day click, right? Which again, some people go, well, that's you're missing out on sales. It's like, well, no, in most cases, clients that we work with, right, if they're selling product, then typically the conversions, 80-90% of the conversions take place within that sort of first day, right? So if you're running a 20-day window, right, then it's typically going to be 2 or 3 touch points that will get people over the line, not that first one, right? So I think if you're sort of like leaving the kind of the clock running all that time, then you're going to give credit to that first touch point rather than the sort of the 3rd or 4th touch point if it's taking place 25 days after the event.
There's a conversation in itself. I mean, we could spend a whole topic on attribution, certainly. And
again, I think that the thing with attribution is in most cases, most businesses that I see, the only reason they have heated discussions about attribution is it's due to recognition and reward, right? So the SEO team wants to take credit for everything. The email team wants to take credit for everything. The messenger team want to take credit for everything, right? But there's not been 7 sales. It's like 1 sale. You need to kind of decide internally kind of how to kind of proportion that money.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next section, which is
the $10,000 question.
If I were to give you $10,000 and you had to spend it over the next few days on a single thing to grow your business, what would you spend it on, and how would you measure success?
Whoa, that's a good question. $10,000. I mean, again, at the moment, obviously, with lockdown, I'd say it would be difficult to do, but there are definitely some sort of masterminds that I think if I had the opportunity to kind of spend 10 grand to go to one of them, I would spend 10 grand to go to a mastermind to get the opportunity to kind of rub shoulders with, with people that could kind of really add value. Again, I've read a great book recently called Who Not How, which is written by a guy called Dan Sullivan. And really that's kind of, you have people that come up with a vision and you have people who can then execute that vision. So I think for me, it's really just a case of, again, I think if you could go to a mastermind, you could find an awful lot of hows to kind of get stuff done. So you could kind of have the idea and then have people that can kind of implement it for you.
And how, I mean, I can certainly understand the value in investing your money in that, but how can you measure the effectiveness of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, that would be kind of probably tougher. Again, I think some of the again, a lot of people talk about influencer marketing, and it's probably one of the channels that's the least trackable. And again, I think we're moving into the realms of everything. We've had the kind of the halcyon days of everything being able to be tracked at a really granular level, and I think what's obviously happening now is we're moving away from that. We're moving into kind of it's much more about kind of more holistic decision making and sort of strategy rather than sort of super granular stuff, right? And so I think for me, it's like the how do you actually measure that? It would be sort of really driven by the sort of the vision that you come up with for the business to enable you to kind of grow and accelerate it.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. You've got to accept that you're never going to be able to track everything, and certainly moving forward, you're probably going to be able to track a lot less than you did a couple of years ago because of what we've just been talking about today.
Or maybe Bitcoin. I don't know.
Maybe Bitcoin. Okay. Maybe blockchain. Maybe whatever the future version of the internet is going to be. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's finish off the conversation with someone else who deserves it. So that is a
magical marketer.
Who's an up-and-coming marketer that you'd like to give a shout-out to? What can we learn from them, and where can we find them?
So again, I think for me, I'm sort of like talking to you today about iOS 14 and Apple and all that sort of stuff. There's a guy called Eric Seufert, Seufert, and he's by far and away the guy who I think has got the best knowledge and sort of ideas around kind of where this iOS 14 thing is kind of kicking in. He's a prolific on Twitter. I think he's got a kind of a website, mobiledevmemo.com, I think it is. But again, I've really kind of taken to kind of listening to what he's got to say, because again, I think, there's an awful lot of people with an opinion. I'm just one of them, right? But I think, he's got a much kind of better take in regards of how this potentially will impact things down the line.
Sorry, what was Eric's surname again, Jim?
Seufert, Seufert.
S-E-U...
Seufert. I think so. I don't know. Let me...
Yes, Seufert. Absolutely.
There we go.
Eric Benjamin Seufert.
There we go.
His name. So, wonderful stuff.
Yeah, but,
it's good.
But
just to clarify.
Mobile Dev Memo is his website, and there's an immense amount of information there. He's very prolific, like I said, on Twitter. So
wonderful. Okay, well, you have been listening to Jim Banks from EliteMediaBuyers.com, who in today's episode of Digital Marketing Radio shared a whole lot of value. We had a great conversation about iOS 14. I love the specific tip about making sure your domain name is approved there. That's something that users can do now. Your secret software, Hemingway. People can find that over at HemingwayApp.com. Next on the list was Inlinks.net, a great platform there as well from Dixon Jones. And your magic marketer was Mr. Eric Benjamin Seufert. I will make sure that everything that Jim mentioned in the show today and more will be listed in the show description over at YouTube, and of course the podcast show notes at digitalmarketingradio.com. Jim, what's the best social platform for someone to follow you and to say hi?
I would probably suggest Twitter. I'm just at Jim Banks on Twitter. I'm also kind of at Jim Banks on Facebook. Like, I've just got Jim Banks everywhere.
Okay, easy enough to find. Apart from
Definitely.
that darn American senator or politician.
Yeah. It's funny. I've been kind of like included in an awful lot of his hate tweets, and he and I have got a bit of rapport going, because I get a bunch of stuff that's really kind of like aimed at him, and I just kind of handle it in a very sort of diplomatic British way. So
you've got all the handles, and you have to compete maybe with Google on them, but that's fun. Okay, well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us today again. I've been your host, David Bain. You can also find me producing podcasts for B2B brands over at castingcred.com. If you want to watch the next episode live, subscribe on the Digital Marketing Radio YouTube channel. And if you're already listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, tell a friend. It's good to share. Until we meet again, stay hungry, stay foolish, and stay subscribed. Aloha.
DigitalMarketingRadio.com. DigitalMarketingRadio.com. Digital Marketing Radio. Digital Marketing Radio. DigitalMarketingRadio.com.